Mary Matzik with Calaveras Community Television. I hope you were able to look at our first series of Storytellers of Calaveras County. This is a new series for us, and we're hoping that you, members of the community, will find someone for our storytellers.
My name's Jess Meckling, and I've lived here for going on 86 years. I was born, within a half a mile up the road. Well, this is my friend, Don Ames. Some people call him something else, I don't remember. I've heard him called lots of things. Very good friend of mine, and knows more about the history of this county than anybody I know. My wife is Lavana. She was raised in Mechling Hill, only 14 miles from here. And we've been married 60 years.
Okay, Jess, what about your grandfather, Daniel Conradi, that owned this place? Tell us a story about him.
Well, he came over here in near the 1850s. I'm not sure of the exact date. Came from Koblenz, Germany, and came to New York, got on a ship and went to, got off the ship at the Isthmus of Panama and walked over the isthmus, caught another ship and took it on to San Francisco, and then ended up here. He's a miner and done quite well. He didn't leave any to me, though.
Well, how did he get into your family? He married a woman from here?
Oh, he married a lady she was born in Stent, but moved over here when she was a small girl. It was my grandmother, Martha Doe. My great-grandfather was John Doe, believe it or not.
And your grandfather was a Doe?
My grandmother was a Doe.
And she married a Mechling?
She married a Conradi.
Oh.
And they had a daughter, Estelle Conradi. That was my mother. She married a Mechling.
Well, what are some of your early memories around here if you were born here?
Well, I remember my grandfather living. My grandmother and grandfather raised me. I stayed with them. My mother died when I was about 2 years old. And just after my younger brother, you knew him, was born. And they raised me since I was born. I remember people bringing bananas up from down below. We never had a chance to get bananas, and I'd come in the house eating a banana, and he'd start cussing in German because he ate so many bananas they almost killed him coming across the isthmus, and he could smell them from. He was blind at that time. He was blind from being blasted in the mines, and but he could smell those bananas. I don't know what he called them, but I know what he called me.
And you were born here, so who were you named after?
I was named after Jess Selkirk. That was an old guy, moved in here in 1905 or 6. He was a regular Buffalo Bill type person, wore long hair, buckskin clothes, and he was a character and liked guns like I do. Maybe that's where I got it.
Was he sort of a rounder then? He was a cowboy, outlaw,
well, yeah, I
renegade.
imagine he done some outlawing in his time. I never heard that he did, but I always had the feeling.
Well, there was supposed to be people gunning for him from Oregon.
Yes, well, up in Prineville, Oregon, in 1905, there was sheep killing wars, they call it. The cowmen didn't like the sheepmen, and they'd come out, man, and have 500 or 600 sheep or more, and they'd shoot them, they'd kill them, tie the guy up that was a sheep herder and kill all the sheep, and the cattlemen, the sheepmen offered a reward for anybody turning evidence on, found out who killed them. So Jess Selkirk come in there and heard about the reward. He was what they called a range detective, and he got in with the sheepmen, or the cattlemen, and knew when they were, he knew all about it, and when he got enough evidence, he turned evidence on them, and they arrested them and sent them to jail, to prison. And they told him, you better watch out when we come out, because we're going to be looking for you. Then that story's in a Western magazine I've read.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
He came down here right after that, and he always carried a pistol on him, and like everybody said, he walked backwards, looking over his shoulder. But then he died a natural death here.
Well, when they took him to the hospital after he got run over, they found more than one pistol. And
Oh
he had a
yes,
gun
when they put him on the operating table, he got ran over up here with a car one night, and they were putting him on the table there, and laid threw the jacket over his big coat over, and a big pistol come flying out of the, and went scooting across the floor, and scared the heck out of the nurses, and he had more than one on him.
Yeah. I think Lee Haley ended up with some of his firearms.
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen 'em,
He's
yeah.
I'd like to have that.
That little one with the
Yeah.
copper
automatic.
sight, yeah, bronze or something, sight welded on it, a penny.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been welded on,
Huh.
soldered on.
So Jess lived here his whole, after 1905, he lived here until he died?
Yeah, well, he lived in Railroad Flat area. I don't know what year he bought that property up there from my father, and built the house, and had a gun shop there.
And they're all buried here in Railroad, in
He's
Independence?
buried up here. He was a Spanish-American War veteran.
Huh. Mr. Conradi buried here too?
Oh, yes.
All of your family's
All
here?
of my family's buried here.
Clear back to the 50s, 1850s?
Yeah. Oh, I have one brother buried he's buried up north. But
Mostly your family's been here since
Yeah.
there was a railroad.
well, my grandmother come here. I think she was maybe 5 years old, and she said she can remember walking up this road when she was a little girl, and seeing a man laying down in the back of the bare feet sticking out. He had a bed in the back porch of a house across here, and could hear him snoring. And that was my grandfather. She finally married him.
I'll be darned. Huh. Your grandmother married old man Conradi, huh?
Yep.
And he was a pothole miner around here?
He was a good miner.
Yeah?
He found many mines around here.
He'd find them, prospect them, and then sell them.
Yep. He said many a mine has been ruined by working. He'd sell them as soon as anybody gave him the money for them.
Huh. And your grandmother she walked to Sandy Gulch?
Well, when she was a girl, yes, she walked to Sandy Gulch. Her and her sister, she used to tell me this story. Wet Gulch country, right below that on the Independence,
Yeah.
between what they called Mosquito then. And walking up, and they looked up, and they said, seen a great big snake along the road. They had a little dog with them. And they grabbed the dog and ran home, scared them. I said, how big around a snake? She said, as big as a stovepipe, which is be 6 inches in
She never did see how long it was?
well, she never said long. She said, that's all. Long
Big
snake.
around.
And it tells in the...
Yeah, there's a lot of stories I've heard,
Yeah.
read in old newspaper articles about the serpent of
A
this
lot
area.
of people seen that.
Yeah. So there conceivably there was some truth to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of them had a big snake, and
Yeah.
and some of them bigger than others.
Well, it depended on how much agua caliente you had in the morning, I suppose. Jess Selkirk was a rounder around Railroad Flat. Tell us the story of Cora Howard or Cora Denslow and the baseball fight. And that was an interesting story I remember you telling.
that
I
was-
think you could tell it.
That was in the 30s.
Oh, later on, but I'll tell it anyway. It's fun.
Well, they used to have a ball team up here, and they'd play other towns. Every town had a baseball team in them days, and we had a park up here, and people would come from Sheep Ranch to play, and Mountain Ranch, San Andres, West Point, Glencoe. Far and was a lot of Stockton teams would come up here and play. Anyway, the Cora Howard, she was some relation to you, was a young, good-looking gal, and these guys was up there at the ball game drunk, and they made remarks, insulting remarks to her, and she mentioned it to the justice of the peace, was Tom Sears. He had a badge, and he went over and told them they got to watch out, and they got smart with him. And Tommy Taylor was walking by, carrying a small baseball bat, and he said, "Tommy, give me that bat." He gave it to him, and he said, "Now are you going to go?" And the guy wised off, and he whacked him right between the eyes with a baseball bat, and down he went. And he said, "Now get in the car, all of you, and leave." They did. They were hollering and shaking their fists. And they went home. They lived between here and Glencoe.
It was a Glencoe team then?
No, that wasn't the team.
Oh, the team.
They were
This
just
was
up here.
just
No, I
guys.
don't know who was playing at the time. And anyway, after the game was over, they'd go down to the railroad. Morse Taylor's was there, and they go down to the store and get a pretty good bead on there, drinking beer, see, and maybe something else. And while we were there, all of a sudden this bunch come riding back and had a big old touring car. Now that used to tell you how far back it was. And they had waving a rifle, and they come in, and they walked up, and Tom Sears was our justice of peace here, and he was standing at the counter at the bar talking, and he walked up to him and said, "You're Tom Sears?" And, "Yeah, I am." And he plowed him one right in the eye. I was looking in, I seen him hit him, and down he went, and there was lots of commotion, and Tom come back up, and in that short a time he had a black eye. I mean, it was black. And he took fighting, a whole bunch of fighting. My the oldest brother was in there, and they all had baseball
Was that
bats
Roy?
and whacking. That was Les.
Les?
And they were whacking the other guys over the head, and they took out after my brother, and he ran with a baseball bat, and when he got out the door, he got to swinging it, and then he jumped off the porch, and one of the guys went down, and by that time they quieted him down with baseball bats, and they told him, "Stay here," and they got the sheriff. He showed up, Joe Swinger.
I know. I've seen his photograph.
Uh-huh. Yeah. He was tough looking.
Was he a crotchety guy?
Oh, he was a nice guy, but he would take care of himself.
Yeah.
And he come up there, and they got the blowing off, and they got Jess Selkirk. Anytime you had trouble around here, they called for Jess Selkirk. A lot of people maybe didn't like him, but when trouble was there, somebody was dying, somebody was fighting, somebody was sick, they got Jess Selkirk. And he showed up down there, and he had this big 6-shooter on him, and the guys come over, "Who do you think you are?" And Jess said, "I'm just the man that lives here." And he whipped that pistol around so it could be seen, and the guys shut up. And anyway, they took him off to jail, and that was the end of that.
So was it the only time you ever seen problem at Taylor's store?
Oh no, I seen lots of fights at Taylor's store. There was but I never seen the one where a man was killed in there.
Lamson.
Lamson was
Lamson-
killed by,
Lamson
he
killed-
killed Lancaster.
Yeah. Stuck him, yeah. Killed him. Yeah. Just in the heat of combat, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was before my time, so
Yeah.
it's in your book.
When you say they drank beer and other stuff, you mean like maybe some moonshine from Fort Mountain?
Yeah.
You've been out there.
Yeah, there's Percy Houston.
Had a still.
had
Yeah.
a still, and he sold whiskey. And Charlie Burns used to get alcohol and make it into whiskey.
They'd color it with something.
Color it with burnt sugar. Yeah.
Didn't Morris send you after some one time when
Oh,
you were
yeah,
about 6
yeah.
years old?
Morris, I was about 6, 7, and he come out and he looking around. He said, "Jess, go up to Mrs. Mrs. Houston's place. Go up to Percy's place and get me a bottle." Yeah. So I didn't know what to do. Grown man told me to do that, so I went walking up to the Houston, which is about, I'd say 2 miles up there. And I went down there and I knocked on the door, and Mrs. Houston, Annie Houston, came to the door. And I didn't know what to say. I said, I held it out like this. I had a bottle, and I said, "Morris sent me up." And she said, "You go back and tell that fat so-and-so just come up by himself or send a man up. Don't send the boy up here." And I took off.
And you never got nothing for doing that, huh?
Nothing. Harold Seaman, he was born 3 weeks after I was over here. That's the days we had, what did they call that lady that come and
Midwife?
midwives had come around, and Mrs. Burns was my midwife. And when I was born, the Seamans come over with a buggy and took her over to Seaman Place, which was about a mile away. And Harold was born 3 weeks after I was. And at the time we started school together. It was 1928. And we were 6 years old, started grammar school up here at the top of the hill. It was now our town hall. And we both started there and went through 8th grade there, all the same teacher, Mrs. Howard. And we hunted and we trapped and fished together all our lives, and was very good friends. And when he got kidney failure and passed away, he beat me to the punch, and so his kids asked where it would be a good place to take his ashes. That's where he wanted to be scattered out where he done his hunting. And I took his boy up and showed him where we hunted all the time, where he missed the deer one time, so he scattered his ashes there. And that was the end of Harold Seaman, and that's where I'll be scattered. And he said, "Hey, get 'em car. We fix 'em up and go to San Francisco, go to a fair," he said. And that's the way he talked.
Pedro and Karsner, Dombey.
Tom Karsner was,
He lived here,
he lived down there, and that's where Pedro was going.
Indian River.
Indian River now they call it.
Indian River.
That's Dombey Road, Dombey Point.
Okay. All right. Well, I did not know that. I knew Dombey lived out in Indian River.
Well, his name was Tom Karsner. They named him after, if anybody read
Dickens?
Dickens, well, you'd know what Dombey and Sons was one of the stories, and that's what they named him after.
And he drove you to work? Or from?
Oh, that was Dombey was falling timber. Now that was when I was 11 years old. Dommy was falling timber up at Tusha Sawmill, which is up at Summit Level.
Yeah.
And I stayed up there that summer. My brother was working there, and
When you were 11?
when I was 11, I stayed up there that summer out of school. I stayed there all summer.
Cool.
And I was supposed to help in the kitchen, but I didn't do much. I went fishing most of the time.